It is the biggest untapped potential that this and future generations have. Why? Because seaweed is incredibly versatile. It can be used for myriad of things, from biostimulants to bioplastics to even leather. While it grows, it has enormous environmental benefits. So it sequesters carbon. It is ecosystem engineer, which means that it hosts up to 1,000 species of biodiversity. The future includes a widespread adoption of seaweed cultivation.
I'm Kat Bruce. I'm the skipper of the Sea Change crew. I'm here today with Samantha Deane, who I've known for a few years now. Samantha's the founder and director of Kelp Forest Foundation. Can you just explain, what's so special about seaweed?
I think it is the biggest untapped potential that this and future generations have. It is incredibly versatile. It can be used for myriad of things, from biostimulants to bioplastics to even leather. But while it grows, it has enormous environmental benefits. So it sequesters carbon. It is ecosystem engineer, which means that it hosts up to 1,000 species of biodiversity. It deacidifies the water. It filters the water. So it is growing incredibly fast. So you could have a kelp forest within 6 to 7 months, and you can use it. It has, not only compounds that are important for food, like vitamins and antioxidants, but it has these alginates and fucoidants. And there are 12,000 types of seaweeds, and we probably only know about 30% of the uses. So for me, it is the most sustainable product on the planet because it doesn't need land, it doesn't need fresh water, fertilizers, or pesticides, or you don't even need to feed it. And it can help, solve quite a lot of the problems that we have. It's not a silver bullet, but it does help. It's a bit like the Swiss Army knife of the ocean.
Amazing. It just blows my mind every time I hear about it. And is it true that if you feed seaweed to cows, you can stop them burping methane?
So if you feed a type of seaweed, which is called asparagopsis taxiformis, which is a red type of seaweed, in a very small doses, so it's not a huge amount that you have to give it, yes, it settles their stomach in a certain way, which means that they burp a lot less, anything between 50 and 85%, according to the Australian scientists who have discovered this. So that is another bow in the arrow that I hadn't mentioned, but yes.
And cow burping is one of the biggest sources of greenhouse gases. So, this sounds sort of wacky, but the impacts can be huge. But I think you're also using it as in some trials around regenerative agriculture as a replacement for fertilizer. Is that right?
Correct. So we are working not only with different universities, like a big university here in Holland, Wageningen, to understand why the kelp biostimulant makes the plants so strong from within. It's a bit like giving plants vitamins as opposed to antibiotics, and which can help in many ways. It can help the plant be more resistant to abiotic stress, which is things like salinity or drought or flooding. But it also means that the plant is a lot more efficient in the nutrient uptake and the water uptake. That could mean that you use less water and obviously less synthetic fertilizers. And that means that if we can get farmers to use less synthetic fertilizers, there will be less runoff of these excess nutrients into waterways that cause a lot of biodiversity loss through eutrophication and dead zones.
And did you always know that you were headed for a career in seaweed? At what point did this enter your sort of sphere?
Definitely not. Having studied law and economics and worked on the trading floor of Merrill Lynch in my younger years, and then gone into design and more that world, I had 3 children, and I think that really changed my perspective on where I wanted to spend the rest of my time and my energy and my skills in. And it had to be something that I felt proud in front of them, that I would at least trying to leave a better planet for them and stop causing, or at least, trying to be part of the solution for a better planet. And when I came across Daniel Hooft and Caroline Slootweg, who had this crazy idea in the middle of COVID 2020 to grow giant kelp, but as forests, and only harvesting the top 10% to make products that not only would make the project economically sustainable, but would also replace other more damaging products like, say, plastics or synthetic fertilizers. And that was a project that excited me because it was pioneering and it was novel. Seaweed cultivation has been around for 400 years. That is not novel. But the fact that they were growing it as kelp forests with a mission to rewild the oceans and help sequester carbon. I think with that kind of aim towards improving the planet and setting up a whole business model where you have to have return on investment, of course, but you have to have also return on social capital, on natural capital, and also on inspiration. I think that holistic view of the kind of businesses that we should be setting up was really what really excited me. And Seaweed was, I saw an amazing way that we have in our fingerprints. It's not in 20 years' time when we've discovered a machine that sequesters carbon. This is now. This is something that we can start deploying and improving and really using and discovering now. And that's what I wanted to be part of for the future of my kids and hopefully grandchildren afterwards.
And so Caroline and Daniel set up Kelp Blue, and you set up Kelp Forest Foundation alongside. Is that right?
So yes. So I joined on the fundraising side because of my background in banking and sales. And soon what we were realizing is when we were trying to quantify the ecosystem services, those benefits of this type of sustainable aquaculture, it was very difficult because nobody had done this before. And so we wanted to have a robust scientific basis. But if nobody's done the research before, then you can't really put a claim or a number to a claim that you're making. And hence we set up the Kelp Forest Foundation to independently study these benefits. Because if you do it in-house, you might be accused of blue washing, greenwashing. But if you have universities, renowned universities, really doing independent studies, and then sharing it openly, you not only be able to tell your investors what you're doing, but you're also helping the whole industry to grow, because you need more seaweed in the water to benefit the ocean, but you also need more product to be able to make other products from the seaweed. So you need a lot more seaweed. So you need a lot of more people cultivating seaweed and investing in that sector. So in a way, it's a bit like an industry accelerator, but we're also a connector. We connect research with industry, and we really try to do the applied science. What does the industry need to be able to increase and accelerate and get independent research to really focus on this area, which is quite a understudied area compared to land-based ecosystems.
And so on our boat is modified to collect various types of environmental data. So we're collecting soundscapes and environmental DNA and microplastics and things. Are you using any of those tools in your research at all? Or we're quite interested to look at some of the wider applications of some of the tools and technologies we're taking around the UK with us. Are there any sort of crossovers with the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. So if you want to understand what the impact, positive or negative, is of an intervention, you always have to create a baseline study. And the baseline study that we are done before the kelp forests were introduced in Namibia by Kelp Blue was, understanding what is there now, what is the quality of the water, and what kind of biodiversity is there, and what are the kind of the trophic interactions that are existing now. Are we going to be improving those? So we have used not just the typical techniques, which are sort of visual and taking GoPros and filming, but we have done cutting edge technology like the one that Nature Metrics provides, which is environmental DNA. And that gives us a very broad brush of what the existing biodiversity and composition is. We also use acoustics to measure the kelp biomass. So to be able to understand the carbon sequestration, we've got to understand how quickly it's growing and how much biomass there is. And because a lot of it is happening underwater, it's not always that easy to calculate the amount of biomass. So we're using traditional techniques in combination with new technologies. And the other thing we're trying to do is we want to understand if these cultivated kelp forests are creating their own biodiversity. What I mean by that is not that just fish are coming to visit, but that there are fish that are using it to have their babies as a spawning ground or to look after, the nursery ground, because that is really what is going to be increasing the amount of biodiversity mix and the amount of fish, which also goes to help fisheries, right? If we are creating a safe haven for fish to proliferate and grow, then that will then translate into maybe commercially valuable fish for the fishery industry.
And speaking of that sort of fishery industry, whereabouts in the world are you working, and what kind of stakeholders are you engaging with there to really try to sort of build the foundations of this new industry and research area?
So for the moment, research-wise, we work with over 25 research institutions in the US, in Europe, in Africa, even Australia, New Zealand, even in Saudi Arabia. In terms of the capacity building and the local research, i.e. the impact of the actual kelp forest, we are mostly starting off in Namibia because that's where the first kelp forest is. We work with Namibian institutions, the University of Namibia, NAST. We have created a fellowship program where we give scholarship to Namibian students to do the research in Namibia and collect the data and really learn and become the seaweed scientists of the future. But we're also going to be working in New Zealand together with First Nation, with iwi groups, and really work together with them to do not only the research, but also the capacity building, eventually also in Alaska. But the idea is really to create centers of excellence around the world as fast as possible. The other interesting thing is to work synergetically with the universities. So, for example, in Namibia, we might be creating like a seaweed course within the university, and where the top students would then come and do an internship and understand how you work on a seaweed farm and research in a seaweed farm. So really working together with the universities to create more education around seaweed, to be able to have even more seaweed farmers around the whole of Africa. And what is exciting is that it is happening in the global south. It is a project that really has an origin in Africa.
Yeah, it does feel like some of these new sort of nature-based industries are such a great opportunity for some of the emerging economies and sort of countries in the global south to actually really lead the way in this. I mean, if these become some of the centres of excellence for research on seaweed and that whole industry in general, I mean, what a great opportunity to really change the paradigm. Can you grow seaweed anywhere?
There are 12,000 types of seaweed. So there will be a seaweed that is native to your area. Kelp, for example, which is a type of brown seaweed that covers about 30% of the coast. But there are, tropical seaweeds, there are cold water seaweeds. And if you're on a coast, most likely you will be able to. But you've got to understand the life cycle, and not, in the world, I think only about 20 seaweeds get cultivated because of the lack of understanding of the life cycle. So there's still a lot that we don't know and that we could be researching.
Is it the same seaweed that you're working on in Namibia that we will be rowing past around Great Britain, or is it different types of kelp, different types of seaweed?
So there are 100 types of kelp or more. We still haven't identified all the names of the seaweeds. So most likely not, because giant kelp doesn't grow in Europe. Giant kelp really grows, west of the US, southern tip of South America, southern tip of Africa, and then Australia, New Zealand, and the sub-Atlantic islands. So no, the answer is no. You won't see any giant kelp. You will see other types of kelp and seaweed.
Okay. And I think some of those types of kelp that we do have around Great Britain still have quite significant potential in terms of industrial use. I think we're going to be talking to some projects that are starting to harvest that kelp and use it for various different types of applications. So it'll be interesting to compare some of what's being done here in this part of the world with the work that you're doing globally with the giant kelp.
What we're trying to do is trying to protect and restore existing wild kelp forests and then incentivize the sustainable aquaculture side, the sustainable growing, so that we don't inadvertently over harvest wild populations. So what we're trying to do is steer away from wild harvesting and going more into growing the kelp in the water. The more kelp we have, the better. Or seaweed, not just kelp.
So I've got two questions to finish off with. The first is, our crew name is Sea Change, so we're all about paradigm shifts. What can we do and change at this moment that will really change the system and lead to a better type of world than the one that we might be on track for if we don't change anything? So what's your vision of the future?
My vision of the future is that we discover seaweed and seaweed ecosystems as an incredibly valuable Amazon rainforest, if you want, of the ocean, so that we protect and restore them. We give it its proper value within our ecosystems and part of its role in nature, but also that the future includes a widespread adoption of seaweed cultivation, because it's such a sustainable solution for such a big amount of industries, from food production to the fashion industry, so that we do a lot of innovation and research, and we do a lot of advancements on the seaweed farming and how to farm sustainably, how to restore these ecosystems, but also how to create more products from this type of cultivated seaweed, so that we can then decarbonize a lot of the other industries that today really need another tool in the toolbox.
And what's the one thing that everybody out there can do to help drive towards that vision becoming a reality?
I think it is supporting companies and organizations that are involved in trying to increase the sector and making it, a large enough sector that it really does a paradigm shift in many other industries. And we as consumers and as owners of industry, for example, we have a conscious choice that we could do. We can start demanding and choosing for low footprint inputs, or the big companies could be really thinking, instead of using synthetic fertilizers, using kelp-based fertilizers, instead of using ingredients that are based on oil, try to use ingredients that are more based on organic materials like seaweed. So I think it comes on two sides: on supporting the players and the organizations that are trying to unlock this value, and then doing the pull, because you need to produce more of it, but you also need to create products that then sell, because that money is going to create more and benefit the whole sector. And of course, educate. What you're doing here is very important, to educate people about the benefits of kelp and the importance of conserving also what we already have before it disappears.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I think that wraps it up beautifully. And I think this thing about being a conscious consumer, and that every time we buy something, we're making a choice and we're making a decision, and we're either consolidating the world as it is, or we're helping to drive towards a new sort of world. So actually, one of the things that we could do to build on that is maybe share in our website some examples of some products that are being made by companies that are exploring the use of kelp for a range of different things. Perhaps we can put together some examples for people to check out. Thank you so much, Samantha, for joining us and for sharing all of your amazing wisdom and insights about seaweed. I think everybody who hears you speak sees seaweed in a whole different way when you come across it. It's not just a slimy brown weed on the beach. It's this incredible superpower that can really change the world. So thank you for bringing that to life for us today.
I'm very happy to be here, and also thank you for giving us a voice and putting seaweed on the podcast, which is really exciting. Thank you, Kat.
Thank you.